What up, thinkers? Welcome to the first episode of Think Responsibly. That's right, think responsibly. Most of us use our brains every day. And I say most of us loosely. As for me personally, I like to think. I like questions. I like learning new things. I like processing information. I like research, all the above. For the most part, this is a widely accepted and practiced interest. Not only that, it's necessary. You go to the doctor's office or you're enjoying some new technology. Where does that stuff come from? It comes from men and women who have decided to dedicate parts of their life and a lot of their brain to research, information, scientific discovery, charts and graphs. I mean, you guys can look at us and call us geek dorks and all of that, but it's the brains behind things that allow us to enjoy something like a cell phone or watch an amazing movie production, things like that. So again, these are widely accepted and practiced interests, whether it's your personal interest or not. However, I find when you like all of these things, when you like hitting the books and you like studying and you like being astute, there seems to be this stigma, especially dealing with science and reading and research and charts and graphs. There's this stigma that if you're a person of faith, then these disciplines have little to do or even contradict with that worldview. So me as a person of faith, particularly the Christian faith, I have had run-ins with individuals who liked what I had to say when I chimed in or commented on something dealing with science or something dealing with technology or just knowledge in general. But then when it comes to the faith part, to the God part, to the Bible part, it's like, that doesn't make sense. It's almost like it's one or the other, because the popular perception is this: being a person of faith with a belief in God or the Bible or trust in Jesus, it means you haven't done your homework, or you're just settling for secondhand information that someone else told you. So there's no way in the world that a mind that can compute and function and use rationale and logic can also share the same space with things like faith and belief and creation. And we are bombarded, those of us who live and walk in faith and trust in God, we're bombarded daily with messages like this. So with that being said, I understand and I can identify with some of the legit issues that pose these statements. When we talk about religion, church, and specifically Christianity, that's up there. There's a tendency for us to communicate with the world around us that we are against things more than what we're for. Another way of saying that is the world pretty much knows more about what we're against than what we're for. And so if what we're against is something that affects them, and emotionally or mentally it's a part of who they are, they feel like we're against them as a whole. So I admit we've kind of dropped the ball in communicating what we're for, who we're for, what we represent. It's easy to just blast and list and meme and gif the things that we don't agree with or approve of, even if it's things that we know that God doesn't like, but we still do ourselves. It's just easier to point out someone else's fault and flaws. I mean, that's why we get the judgy stigma. Understand it. So how do we as believers change that perspective or that persona or that stigma or even that stereotype? We first need to know what we believe and what we stand for and who we stand for. So we have to know. We have to use the mind, so that it doesn't seem like we're just blindly walking into this thing and we don't know nothing, and pick up a book and read, and then you'll eventually you'll get to where we are. So I'll admit, we've been seen as too emotional or too charismatic. There's a saying, we're so heavenly minded, we are of no earthly good. Or we're just downright too sensitive or too legalistic or too defensive. It's especially when it comes to talking with someone who doesn't agree with us. I understand all of that. But to hold us Christians to the notion that faith is blind, it's not only not fair to see Christians, people of faith, in that light, but it's also not true. And I want to invite believers and non-believers to a series of conversations that highlight the fact that we are not, number one, intellectually ignorant or intellectually inferior. Our faith in God is informed, and it's because of that our lives have been transformed. It's an informed faith. In fact, we are challenged daily to love God with all of our heart, our mind, our soul, and our strength. We're encouraged in the book of Romans to be renewed where? In our minds, not in our good deeds, not in our piety. Transformation starts up here. As we are told to pursue wisdom, we realize the beginning of wisdom starts with the reverence of God, or the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Yeah, that sounds super religious, super spooky, and we'll talk about that more in part 2 of this. The beginning of wisdom starts with the reverence of God. Wisdom. The Bible could have just said the beginning of faith or the beginning of prayer. It's saying wisdom. It's talking about the mind. It's talking about thinking. There's something about the mind that appeals to God. And so, yeah, I'll talk more on that on part 2. But check this out. If you're a tech head, if you love computers, if you love binary codes, if ones and zeros get you excited, if you're up to date on your TED Talks, then this might excite you. If not, just bear with me. The IBM Summit, that's the world's fastest supercomputer. There was one before that. One of the Asian countries built it, but they just lost to the IBM Summit, home of the USA. Supercomputer, right? So it's the size of, some say 2 tennis courts, some say 2 basketball courts. It's big. They can perform 200 quadrillion calculations, whatever that means. That's per second, 200 quadrillion, or 200 petaflops. With all of its impressive processing, calculating, and problem-solving capabilities, we still have to acknowledge, and I looked at this thing, we still have to acknowledge it was still created and designed outside of itself. So as smart and as fast as that computer is, it had designers. It had creators. And you can do your wiki homework, wiki homework, and find out what team partook in building such a supercomputer. As impressive as it is, again, we still have to give reverence to the creators and the designers. Otherwise, there'd be none to brag about. And that's what I'm saying. That's pretty much all I'm saying. Faith in God does not take away from science, research, intellect, rationale, charts and graphs. It gives credit to the designer and the creator. I mean, Steve Jobs, his name alone rings a bell. He probably didn't personally put your iPhone together. I can guarantee that he didn't. But yet, his ideas, it was his intellect, it was his innovation that gets the credit for the Apple products. That's what it is. Doesn't take away from your science, doesn't take away from your rationale. We just give credit to whom credit is due. Now, the skeptics might say, in order to have faith, we must be blind. But us believers say, it's because of faith. Once we were blind, and now we can see. Think responsibly.